Uri Geller. You probably know him as the guy who bends spoons with his mind. For decades, he's been a household name, a magician, a mentalist, an entertainer. But what if I told you that was just the surface? What if the spoon bending, the stopped watches, the mind reading, what if that was all a cover for something much deeper, much more serious, and far more secret? Today, we're re-diving into the declassified files and whispered confessions that paint a picture of Uri Geller not as a showman, but as a psychic spy for the CIA and Mossad. It sounds like a blockbuster movie plot, right? But the story is backed by some surprisingly compelling evidence, including documents released under the Freedom of Information Act and even Geller's own admissions. Our story begins in the 1970s, at the height of the Cold War. The world was a chessboard, and the US and the Soviet Union were the two grandmasters, each trying to anticipate the other's every move. In this tense atmosphere, both sides were desperate for any advantage, no matter how unconventional. The Soviets were pouring millions into psychotronic research investigating telepathy, clairvoyance, and telekinesis for military use. They were reportedly trying to create psychic weapons and even attempting to remotely influence the minds of American leaders. The CIA couldn't afford to be left behind. This led to the creation of one of the most bizarre and secretive programs in American intelligence history, Project Stargate. The goal: to see if psychic phenomena could be weaponized or used for intelligence gathering. They recruited people who claimed to have psychic abilities, known as remote viewers, to try and spy on Soviet military sites from thousands of miles away, just by using their minds. And who was one of the most famous psychics in the world at that time? Uri Geller. In 1972, Geller was brought to the Stanford Research Institute, a key location for the CIA's psychic experiments. For 8 days, scientists subjected him to a battery of tests. The results, detailed in a now declassified CIA document, are mind-boggling. In one experiment, a scientist would randomly draw a picture in a sealed, electrically shielded room. Geller, in another room, would then try to replicate the drawing. When the scientist drew a bunch of grapes, Geller drew a near-identical cluster, even correctly guessing the number of grapes. When they drew a dove, he drew a bird. The report concludes that Geller demonstrated his paranormal perceptual ability in a convincing and unambiguous manner. The CIA was impressed, and they weren't the only ones. According to Geller and other sources, he was also working with Mossad, Israel's legendary intelligence agency. He claims he was first recruited after demonstrating his abilities to Prime Minister Golda Meir. His alleged missions read like a spy novel. He says he was asked to stand outside the Jordanian embassy in Rome and psychically wipe the data from floppy disks being carried by diplomats. He claims he used his mind to disable Soviet radar systems during the famous Entebbe raid in 1976. Allowing Israeli commandos to land undetected and rescue hostages. He even asserts he was involved in influencing a Soviet official to defect during arms control talks in Geneva, bombarding him with telepathic thoughts of defect. One of the most dramatic claims involves a mission deep within Soviet territory. Geller says he was flown on a secret mission to a Soviet nuclear facility. His task was to use his powers to get a sense of their nuclear capabilities, essentially becoming a human satellite, looking inside top-secret buildings with his mind. Could this be true? It's impossible to verify with 100% certainty, as you'd expect from the world of covert operations. But the CIA's own documents confirm their intense interest in him. They saw him not just as a curiosity, but as a potential asset, a unique weapon in the shadow war against the Soviets. Of course, there's a massive amount of skepticism surrounding Geller. Magicians like James Randi spent years trying to debunk him, arguing that everything he did could be replicated with simple stage magic, sleight of hand, and misdirection. Randi famously offered $1 million prize to anyone who could prove they had paranormal powers under scientific conditions. Geller never took the test. Skeptics point out that the experiments at Stanford were flawed. They suggest that the scientists weren't trained to spot trickery, and that there were potential holes in the security protocols that could have allowed for cheating. They argue that Geller is simply a masterful showman who managed to fool not only the public, but also some of the world's top intelligence agencies. So, which is it? Is Uri Geller a charlatan who pulled off one of the greatest cons in history, fooling scientists and spies alike? Or is he a genuinely gifted individual whose abilities were so extraordinary that governments sought to harness them for national security? The CIA documents prove their interest was real. They spent taxpayer money investigating his powers. Former intelligence officers and scientists who worked on the program have gone on record supporting the reality of psychic phenomena. A man named Dr. Kit Green, a former CIA analyst who was involved in the program, has stated that the remote viewing program was successful and that Geller's abilities were real. He said, and I quote, "We have a group of people that can do this. They're not 100%, but they're better than chance." The debate is fascinating because it operates at the very edge of what we consider possible. If you believe the skeptics, it's a story about the power of illusion and the fallibility of even the most powerful organizations. It shows how a desperate desire for an edge can lead people to believe in the unbelievable. But if you believe Geller and the declassified files, the world is a much stranger place than we imagine. It suggests that human consciousness has capabilities we are only just beginning to understand, and that for a brief, strange period during the Cold War, the fate of nations may have rested, in part, on the mind of a man who bent spoons for a living. Geller himself remains enigmatic. In recent years, he's leaned more into his history as a psychic spy, even publishing letters and documents to back up his claims. He seems less concerned with proving his powers to skeptics and more interested in solidifying his legacy as a figure who operated in the shadows of history. He says the reason he could never accept Randy's challenge was because he was bound by secrecy, unable to reveal the true nature and source of his work without betraying the trust of powerful intelligence agencies. Ultimately, the story of Uri Geller, the psychic spy, leaves us with more questions than answers. Were his abilities a genuine phenomenon that governments tried to weaponize? Or was it all a masterful deception, a psychological operation in itself, perhaps even designed to make the Soviets waste resources chasing psychic phantoms? The truth is likely buried under layers of secrecy and disinformation, a puzzle where many of the pieces are still missing. But one thing is for sure, whether he's a magician, a mentalist, a spy, or all of the above, Uri Geller's life has been anything but ordinary. The man who bent spoons may have also been the course of history. What do you think? Was Geller a secret agent with paranormal powers, or the world's most successful magician? Let me know your theories in the comments below. It's a story that challenges our perception of reality itself. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoy exploring the world's greatest mysteries, make sure to subscribe for more.